Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses until my 8-year-old daughter placed a red box in front of her grandmother and said, "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." Wearing the glittering gold outfit she had chosen herself, my 7-year-old daughter stood before a packed table. She held a little present package in her little fingers. Too preoccupied to see her, all the adults in the room were clinking their glasses and giggling. Except for me. I kept a tight eye on it. "Grandma, Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again," she continued, lifting the box a little and glancing squarely at her grandma. Everything came to a halt. Forks stopped in midair. The sound of the music melted into the background. My husband's mother, her grandma, smiled tightly and bewilderedly as though it were a joke. She didn't laugh, though, when she opened the box. She let out a scream. Louder than the Christmas carols, louder than the gasps, louder than the ensuing hush, a piercing, guttural roar ripped through the room. People hurried to check out the contents. However, I was already aware. That crate was packed months earlier by my husband. He informed me that his mother had gone too far that day. Today was that day? Let me explain how we got here, how one little box broke every false smile that had kept this family together for years, and how my daughter disappeared in a room full of presents. I believed that Michael and I would be joining a large, devoted family when we were married. They were noisy, close-knit, and constantly planning holiday parties, game nights, and cookouts. The focal point of it all was his mother, Barbara. She had an opinion on everything and a voice that could silence a room. I assume that's just the way strong women were in managing families. I held her in high regard. I sincerely hoped she would like me. She pretended to be one at first. She gave me a farewell embrace, smiled over dinners, and complimented my food. However, I quickly became aware of the change. When she was texting the family group, she would forget to include me. She would make remarks about how I wasn't raised with the same ideals as the women in their family. It was always inconspicuous. Just enough to make me wonder whether I was just dreaming. Then Ellie appeared. My first marriage produced a daughter named Ellie. When Michael entered our lives, she was 2 years old. He didn't think twice. He filled the void with love, patience, and all the tenderness a parent ought to provide. He legally adopted her when we were married. The word step was never used in our home. In all the important ways, she was his daughter. He was also her father. Barbara, however, never came to terms with that. She pretended at first. On holidays, she would bring Ellie a small gift or send her a card on her birthday. But there was always a distinction. Ellie was not asked to sleepovers with her cousins. The matching Christmas jammies did not include her. During family gatherings, she would remain silent while the other grandchildren were lavish with attention. After buying Lucas his favorite sports equipment and calling Haley her little princess, Barbara would give Ellie a cheap toy or a book that she obviously never glanced at. Ellie took note. Children always do. I made an effort to justify it. I explained to Ellie that Grandma loved her in her own way and that she was simply forgetful. However, it became more difficult to defend each year. Barbara offered a unique dish with each grandchild's name painted in gold for Thanksgiving. One of the extras from the back of the cabinet was used to set Ellie's seat. "Maybe she thinks I'm just visiting," Ellie murmured to me that evening. I was at a loss for words. Michael also heard it. Although he remained silent, I could see his jaw tighten. I had never considered the possibility that he was beginning to notice it as well until then. We continued to show up, though. I convinced myself that it was for the greater good, for tradition, for family cohesion, for Ellie to have cousins and holiday memories as she grew up. I convinced myself that matching pajamas and presents weren't necessary to demonstrate love. However, I was secretly deceiving myself. I didn't want to be perceived as the issue, so I kept quiet. I didn't want Michael to have to decide between me and his mother. And each time I swallowed my hurt, I told myself that I was being the bigger person for Ellie and that it would teach her something valuable. However, I was unaware that it was teaching her that we had to accept being treated less. I had multiple arguments with Michael over it. After Ellie had gone to bed, I would mention it in hushed, tired tones. He would claim to have observed, but he was unsure of how to respond. He didn't want to do his mother any harm. I said to him, "How about Ellie?" He would nod, say he would speak to her later, and then he would stop talking. By the time Christmas arrived this year, I was emotionally spent. For the children, I had brought matching clothes. I shared the extra cookies I brought. I prepared considerate presents for every member of the family. This year might be different, I persuaded myself. However, I had also altered on the inside. I had given up looking for acceptance. I was observing, awaiting. getting ready for the time when it would no longer be considered a gesture of kindness to remain silent. And that time arrived sooner than I had anticipated. It was the smile Barbara gave Haley when she gave her a brand new iPad. How she gave Lucas a cheek kiss before giving him a large envelope containing $1,100. Didn't want you to feel completely left out, she replied, turning to Ellie and giving her a lavender candle. I turned to look at Michael at that point. He remained silent. He didn't flinch. But there was a change in his expression. I realized then that he had remembered what he had told Ellie months before. The package was still with him. She hadn't either. Throughout the holidays, Barbara's home was always ideal. She had a magnificent artificial tree with glittering lights and gold ornaments that reached the ceiling. Each branch appeared to have been taken from a catalog. There were so many wrapped presents beneath the tree that you could hardly see the base. The table was arranged with exquisite china and the fireplace was lit. It ought to have had a mystical quality. But my stomach constricted the moment we entered. Ellie, wearing the gold dress she had chosen herself, entered before me, her locks bouncing with every step. She was holding the little wrapped present she had created for Barbara in art class. Little rhinestones were glued onto a painted wooden trinket box. On the lid she had written Grandma in wobbly glitter letters. She took great pride in it. When we said hello, Barbara hardly gave her a glance. She immediately gave Haley and Lucas hugs while giggling and remarking on how big they were growing. She winked and gave Haley a velvet pouch. Don't open it just yet, she advised with a smile. Hello, sweetie, she said, turning to face Ellie. You appear festive. She looked down at the present Ellie was holding, accepted it without actually seeing, and placed it on a side table as if it were an accidental napkin that someone had given her. Ellie remained silent. After giving me a quick glance, she sat down quietly next Haley on the couch. While the parents engaged in small talk, the children played and chatted. I watched from the periphery of it all as my daughter gradually faded into her own family's backdrop. It was time for gifts after supper. It was always a production for Barbara. She called up each youngster as if they were kings and queens as she distributed them one by one while seated in her recliner. Lucas came first. He opened a money-filled envelope. Everyone gave a clap. Haley followed. She unwrapped a brand new iPad together with a set of real silver and crystal bracelets. She gave Barbara such a tight hug that she almost lost her grip on the iPad. Then Ellie's name was called by Barbara. After a lengthy silence, she remarked, "This is for you, sweetheart," and held up a tiny gift bag. I didn't want you to feel excluded entirely. Silently, Ellie got up, went over, and picked up the bag. It contained a simple glass jar with a lavender-scented candle. A sticker that said, "To Michael's girl," was affixed. That was it. No envelope. Not a toy. No glitz. Only a tag that felt like a knife and a flame. I turned to face Michael. His jaw was clenched, his fingers interlaced, and he was looking at the ground. He remained silent. Ellie took a seat beside me and held the candle in her hand. She refrained from crying. She didn't scowl. However, I noticed that she was gradually closing up and drawing within. The sort of silence that lingers in a child's mind long after the day is over. Barbara continued as though nothing had occurred. She distributed additional presents. Everyone drank with champagne, ate dessert, and laughed, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was unable to look away from Ellie. She remained courteous, pretending to be intrigued by the bracelet Haley was flaunting and giving Barbara a gentle "thank you" when she was asked. I approached Michael in the kitchen later. I muttered, "You have to say something." She referred to your daughter as Michael's girl as if she were a visitor. He took a while to respond. I told Ellie to give her the box if this ever happened again, he continued. I let her choose when it was appropriate. I gazed at him. Are you serious? He gave a nod. She recalls. Ellie held her candle and sat peacefully in the back seat of the car on the ride home. Is Grandma upset with me? She said in a tiny voice. Michael spoke before I could turn back and grab her hand. No, my love, he said. Grandma simply overlooked something crucial. However, I believe she's going to remember. Ellie glanced down at the box in her lap, wrapped in plain red paper, that Michael had given her months earlier. Then I want to give it to her tomorrow, she remarked after giving one nod. I realized then. We weren't going to overlook this moment like we often do. This was not going to be just another lesson in civility or patience. There was a change. My daughter would not remain unnoticed. No more. Michael took the remaining cookies from the back seat as I assisted Ellie in getting out of the car when we arrived home that evening. In one hand she held the little box and in the other the candle. Like delicate memories, they both wrapped. She was obviously suppressing more than simply the weight of her belongings. Despite her silence, there was a constant, serene expression on her face as if she had already made up her decision. Before going to bed, I asked her if she wanted to watch a movie or take a bath. No, she said. All she wanted to do was prepare for tomorrow. I stopped. What's coming up tomorrow? As if I should know, she gave me a look. Go to Grandma's for brunch. I'll give the box to her. My breath caught in my chest for the first time at that moment. It was the straightforward assurance in her voice, not the fear. A 7-year-old who had finally had enough made the decision without doubt or question. I had just finished brushing Ellie's hair when Michael entered the room. Can I still give it to her? She asked, looking up at him. He gave a nod. You have a choice, Ellie. That's what I told you right away. She grinned, but not in the way she usually does when we tell her we're going to the zoo or offer her ice cream. It was smaller, more concentrated, as though she was aware of the burden she was bearing, as if she understood what being heard meant. I finally asked Michael what he had written in that box after she had gone to bed. He appeared worn out, as though he had been suppressing a storm for too long when he sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He recalled I was at Lucas's birthday party a few months ago watching her play with Haley. All of them were in the backyard. Barbara invited the children to join her for cake. Lucas and Haley received slices topped with additional icing and sprinkles. The final piece went to Ellie. Not a single ornament. Not a candle. Nothing. That day came back to me. I had made an effort to convince myself it wasn't deliberate. He went on. She approached me and inquired as to whether she was also a cousin. I took a seat and penned a letter that evening. I reprinted the adoption documents. The parcel was packed by myself. I told Ellie that if she ever felt like she didn't belong again, she could give it to my mother. My throat constricted. And you didn't tell me. He stated I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't want to start a new debate with you about my family. But I had to let Ellie know that I noticed. I wanted her to feel as though she had a solid foundation. Years had passed while I waited for Michael to draw a line, thinking he would speak up. And here he was, drawing it in silence. Not by yelling, avoid conflict, but by giving his daughter the authority to speak up. Ellie dressed as if it were picture day at school the following morning. She requested permission to don her glistening gold gown once more. Her curls needed a makeover. The glittery headband she wore on the day Michael signed the adoption papers was the one she selected. It wasn't for luck, she said. She didn't have to. I was aware. She used both hands to hold the red box on her lap in the automobile. Don't fidget. No second thoughts. Everything was the same when we got to Barbara's residence. The door has the same wreath. The same ham and cinnamon scent. The same false praises and courteous pleasantries. This time, though, something felt different. Only in us, not in the room. We were no longer tourists attempting to blend in. As a family, we entered with our truth. Ellie sat through brunch in silence. She rarely touched her plate. Barbara gave Haley's dress 3 compliments. She never once brought up Ellie's. Ellie got up as desserts were being passed out after everyone had finished dining. At first, nobody noticed. She then positioned the box in front of Barbara, who was sitting with her wine glass at the head of the table. Grandma, she stated emphatically, if you ever ignore me again, I'll give this to you, Dad told me. The room became silent. Barbara laughed a little, bewildered. What is this, my love? Ellie remained silent. She took a seat after taking a step back. Under the table, Michael grabbed my hand and squeezed it. For a brief moment, the box remained closed. As if it were a practical joke, Barbara took up the package. She flipped it in her palms, arched an eyebrow, and let out a half-laugh that didn't fit the quiet that was settling on the table. Now everyone was observing. Michael's sister appeared perplexed. Haley gazed. Unaware of what was going on, Lucas continued to devour a cookie. Barbara slowly peeled the red gift paper as if she were entertaining the audience. But as soon as she opened the lid, her smile vanished. A picture in a white frame rested on top. On Ellie's 2nd birthday, it showed Michael cradling her in a hospital chair. She had her arms around his neck and cake on her cheeks. It had been taken at the celebration of her adoption. At the bottom, the caption was written in gold and said, Dad, Day 1. There was a sealed envelope underneath the picture. Barbara's expression changed. With shaky hands, she reached inside and opened the package, her mouth tightening. She produced the initial document. It was a copy of the adoption documents for Ellie. Lawful. Signed by a judge. Under Father, Michael's name was prominently displayed. The bottom was imprinted with the court seal. She blinked vigorously, as if it might say something different if she looked again. However, it didn't. She then unfolded a folded letter. Michael's handwriting appeared on it. I felt his hand tighten around my fingers beneath the table, but he didn't flinch when she began to read. As she read, Barbara's face fell with each word, her lips moving silently. It stated, "Mom, you have harmed my daughter once more if you are reading this. Not only by love, but also by law, commitment, and decision. You've been treating Ellie like an outsider for years. I wished for a change. I hoped you would be as open-hearted as I was. She must have seen what I saw, though, if she ever had to give you this package. That you don't think she's genuine. My child is Ellie. She's your granddaughter. You don't love me if you can't love her as much as you love me. I refuse to let her grow up believing that she must merit a spot in this household. She is already a member. She has always done so. Michael, you will no longer be welcome in our house or in our lives if you are unable to accept that." Barbara dropped the letter onto the table as if it had burned her fingers when she had done reading it. She had a pallid face. Looking around, she tried to find someone who could save her. Nobody said anything. Then she shouted as if something had snapped inside of her. Not crying. No surprise. A scream, primal and harsh, as if a curtain had been torn off all she had feigned. She got up so quickly that her chair brushed the hardwood floor. Haley winced. Lucas stopped. "I can't believe you'd embarrass me like this," said Barbara as she retreated when Michael's sister reached out to stabilize the table. At last Michael got up. "You weren't embarrassed by us," he said. "You did that on your own." Barbara gestured toward me. "She is to blame for this. You turned against your own mother because of this chick. So did I. I didn't speak louder. I didn't have to." "No," I replied. "You received a present from Ellie. You have the opportunity to see her because of her. You decided not to." The crackling of the fireplace was the only thing you could hear for a little period. Ellie sat silently and observed. Not afraid. Not perplexed. Merely observing the truth as it develops. Michael turned and extended his hand to her. "All set to go?" With a nod, she got to her feet. I assisted her into her coat after grabbing ours. Nobody intervened. Nobody bid farewell. Together, my husband, our kid, and I left the house, which was decked out with ideal centerpieces, decorations, and hollow approbation. Ellie fastened her seatbelt and stared straight ahead in the automobile. She remained silent for a while. Then, quietly, she inquired, "Is it your opinion that she read the entire letter?" In the rearview mirror, Michael glanced at her. "Every word." Ellie grinned. "Not very large. Not really dramatic. Enough to let me know that something had calmed down inside her. Not because Barbara had changed, but rather because she no longer required her." After that day, we didn't return to Barbara's house. Birthday festivities are over. No more imposed holidays. No more acting like you're someone you're not. No irate follow-up texts were sent. No pathetic phone calls. Nothing but quiet. We didn't pursue her and she didn't reach out. There was peace for once. I initially assumed Ellie would inquire about her. I anticipated inquiries, perhaps a little melancholy. Instead, though, I noticed a peaceful freedom. At family gatherings, she stopped keeping an eye on the door. She ceased inquiring as to why her name was omitted from the group crafts, and why she didn't receive the same gifts. She ceased evaluating herself based on how other people treated her. Something had changed. A week after Christmas, one afternoon, a little protected envelope showed up in the mail. Ellie was the recipient. There was a handwritten message from Haley, and a silver bracelet with a small heart pendant. It stated, "I apologize for Grandma's cruelty. You will always be my cousin. This is what I chose with my allowance." The note was read twice by Ellie. The band was then placed onto her wrist. She didn't inquire about wearing it daily. She simply did. For her, that one act was more meaningful than a dozen pricey presents. It made me realize that kids don't require flawlessness. All they need is to feel selected. They need to know that they are noticed, heard, and valued by someone. Michael also underwent a transformation. The guilt of being in the way of his mother and his daughter had been with him for years. Two realms that will never really meet had been attempted to be bridged by him. However, after that brunch, I noticed a change in his gaze. Relief, not just resolution. He had already decided. He made Ellie his choice without regret, without apology, and without any restrictions. He was sitting on the edge of her bed one night, watching her breathe as she slept. "I should have done it sooner," he added, glancing up at me. I told him, "You did it just when she needed you to." We began creating new customs. Smaller ones. More slowly. More deliberate. We decorated cookies for our neighbors with Ellie's help. In our pajamas we watched movies and constructed pillow forts. We made no effort to restore what had been lost. All we did was concentrate on creating what was authentic. People talk about severing ties with toxic family members as if it were simple, as if you draw a line and then move on. It isn't. It is painful. Even when it's required. Even if you're correct. Seeing your child shrink to accommodate the comfort of another person, however, is more painful. I'm not going to repeat it. Because someone else won't provide more, I won't ask my daughter to continue taking less. There was no drama or retaliation at Barbara's table that day. It was not about creating a commotion. In a place where she had always been treated like a visitor, Ellie was claiming her space. Her statement, "I belong here," was the focus. She didn't, even when someone tried to convince her otherwise. And it had to do with us, her parents, at last supporting her in more ways than words. Ellie no longer discusses the box. She is not required to. However, I kept it. It's in a drawer in my bedroom, next to the hospital wristband from the day she was born and her first pair of baby shoes. I preserve it because I want to remember the strength it required to face the agony, not because I want to recall the hurt itself. Her voice is power. The silent force behind her decision. Even though she is just 7, I will always remember what she taught me. Family members don't put up the best show of affection for you in front of others. It has nothing to do with who has your blood type or last name. When it counts, family is there. Who stands up for you when things get tough? When everyone else makes you feel insignificant, who gives you a sense of security? Ellie now possesses that, not because she got it but because she took ownership of it. She also provided it to us in the process. In the end, Ellie just maintained her ground, and that was plenty. She didn't have to yell or struggle to be heard. The most effective retaliation isn't always loud or harsh. It's making the decision to be peaceful, establishing limits, and leaving with your dignity unharmed. If you're recovering from betrayal, keep in mind that silence speaks louder than words, and that progress is more important than retaliation. When someone made you feel inferior, have you ever had to let them go? We read all of your stories, so please share yours in the comments. When you eventually defended yourself, what did you discover?